All right, so today we're gonna dive into a topic that's pretty heavy. We're
Yeah.
gonna explore what rebuilding Syria after Assad might look like,
Oh, wow.
and
That's
you know,
that's a big one.
it is a big one,
Yeah.
and our sources paint a really stark picture of the devastation after more than a decade of civil war.
Yeah.
But it's not all doom and gloom.
Right.
There are some hints of hope in there too, and that's what we're gonna try to unpack today together.
It's crucial to remember, I think, with this topic that, this is all hypothetical.
Right.
We're not saying that Assad's fall is a certainty or anything like that.
Yeah, exactly.
And, what's interesting about this topic is we're not just talking about rebuilding, bridges and buildings. We're talking about rebuilding a society that's been really deeply divided and rebuilding trust in a system that's basically crumbled.
Yeah, I mean, it's a huge challenge, right? We're talking about over 12 million people displaced.
Mm.
Uh, the Syrian economy has shrunk by something like 60%. And rebuilding is going to cost somewhere between 250 and $400 billion.
Yeah, it's hard to even imagine numbers that big, right?
Yeah, you can't even fathom it.
Think of it this way, like, imagine if everything you could buy, every service you use, suddenly became 60% more expensive. That's the reality that Syrians are facing. And this isn't just a Syrian problem. We can see the impact of this conflict all over the world, from, the strain on European social systems, from the influx of refugees to the rise of extremist groups that have taken advantage of the chaos. Rebuilding Syria is not just a regional issue. It impacts all of us.
Well, let's start by looking at the extent of the devastation, because our sources really do paint this truly heartbreaking picture of the humanitarian crisis.
Right.
We're talking about over 6.8 million Syrians internally displaced, another 5.6 million who have had to seek refuge in other countries, and the death toll has already passed 500,000.
And remember, those are just the tip of the iceberg. Those numbers don't show the countless lives that have been shattered by injuries, the psychological trauma that an entire generation is dealing with, and the fact that the healthcare system has basically collapsed, leaving millions of people vulnerable to disease and despair.
Yeah, I was looking at some pictures of Aleppo before the war,
Oh, wow.
and it's just devastating.
Yeah.
This once vibrant city that was famous for this ancient citadel is now a shadow of its former self.
Right.
And it really hits you when you see the scale of the destruction.
Yeah, the photos are powerful.
Yeah.
And it's not just Aleppo, cities like Homs and Damascus. They were once so full of life, but now they're just scarred by war. And you can
Right.
really see the evidence of this brutal conflict on their streets.
And on top of all that, their energy sector, which was such a key part of their economy,
Mm.
has been decimated.
Right.
Oil production has plummeted by over 90%.
It's complete economic ruin. Like
Yeah.
80% of the population is now living below the poverty line, just struggling to survive.
Wow.
And the situation is further complicated by these international sanctions.
Right. While they're intended to pressure the regime, they also make it harder for the country to recover.
Yeah. So we're looking at a nation that's been shattered, not just physically, but economically and socially. Rebuilding Syria is like trying to piece together a broken mosaic.
Right.
And it's a monumental task that's going to demand unwavering commitment and global cooperation.
Absolutely. And that brings us to the next crucial point, which is the immense complexity of rebuilding.
Right.
So let's start with the challenge of trying to restore governance and the rule of law in a nation that's been fractured by years of conflict.
So it's almost like a game of Risk, but with real lives at stake.
Yeah, basically.
Who are the major players here vying for power?
Well, you've got various factions all fighting for control, weak institutions struggling to function, and a really deeply ingrained culture of corruption that erodes any trust people might have in the system.
Yeah.
It's like trying to build a house on shifting sand.
And then there's this monumental task of reintegrating millions of refugees.
How do you guarantee their safe return? How do you give them a reason to rebuild their lives in a country that's been so torn apart?
Exactly. And how do you bring together communities that have been divided by the conflict and displacement? It's a recipe for potential tension and resentment if it's not handled really carefully.
And let's not forget that astronomical price tag that we mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
250 to $400 billion.
Yeah. Securing that kind of funding requires a coordinated effort from international donors, NGOs, and local governments, each with their own agendas and priorities.
It's like everyone wants to bake a cake and everyone wants to add their own ingredients.
Yeah,
but some of those ingredients might explode.
Right.
That's the kind of balancing act that we're talking about.
And we can't ignore the geopolitical tightrope walk.
Right.
Syria is at the heart of so many international interests, with Russia, Iran, Turkey, and the United States all vying for influence.
Yeah.
Making sure that the aid reaches those who need it most without it becoming a political pawn adds another layer of complexity.
Millions of lives at stake.
Millions of lives at stake.
We've painted a pretty bleak picture so far, but amid all this devastation, are there any signs of hope?
Absolutely, there are. Our sources do offer some glimmers of light, some potential paths toward a brighter future.
Okay.
And that's what we'll explore after the break. Before we get into those, those glimmers of hope we were talking about, it's important to remember, like, just the scale of the devastation we talked about.
Yeah.
And just how complex it is to rebuild a nation that's been so shattered, like Syria.
Right.
I mean, it's easy to get lost in the darkness.
Right.
There are seeds of hope even in the face of these challenges.
So let's try to explore those glimmers of light.
Yeah.
One area that really stood out to me in the source material was the potential for economic revitalization.
Yeah, and it's not just a pipe dream.
Yeah.
A stable political environment would allow Syria to attract, substantial foreign investment,
Right.
particularly in sectors like energy and infrastructure.
Right.
And remember, they had a booming oil industry before the
Oh, yeah.
conflict. Rebuilding that could create jobs and boost economic activity.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to picture it right now, but what would a revitalized Syrian economy even look like?
Well, I mean, just imagine a Syria where, like, the sounds of war are replaced by the hum of industry,
Right.
where construction cranes rise above the rubble,
Yeah.
and where a spirit of entrepreneurship fuels a new era of growth. And, we can't forget about Syria's young population.
All right.
They're a powerful force for change. They're brimming with energy and ideas.
If we can empower them with education, training, and opportunities,
Exactly.
they could really become like the architects of a brighter future.
Totally.
Yeah, driving innovation, shaping a more dynamic economy.
Yeah, and in the Syrian diaspora, millions of whom have sought refuge abroad,
Right.
they represent this vast pool of talent and expertise and resources.
And many of them have achieved remarkable success in their new homes, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And many of them are eager to contribute to their homeland's recovery.
Yeah, that's amazing.
There are organizations that are specifically working to connect diaspora professionals with opportunities to invest in Syrian businesses,
Wow.
to mentor young entrepreneurs, and to share their skills and knowledge.
That's great.
They're acting as a bridge between Syria and the rest of the world.
So it's important to remember that rebuilding a nation goes beyond just economics.
Absolutely.
It's about rebuilding communities and restoring trust and weaving back together this social fabric that's been torn apart by conflict.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And that's where the power of community comes in.
Right.
Our sources highlight the incredible resilience of the Syrian people, their spirit of solidarity, and their deep-rooted cultural heritage.
Yeah.
Even in the darkest of times, they found ways to support each other, rebuild their lives, and keep their traditions alive.
It's amazing how these grassroots initiatives, often operating under the radar, have been quietly working to heal divisions, bridge divides, foster a sense of unity.
They're the unsung heroes,
Yeah.
planting seeds of hope in the most challenging of circumstances.
So what are some of the things that they're doing?
Well, a lot of these initiatives focus on rebuilding local infrastructure,
Mhm.
providing essential services, and creating spaces for dialogue and reconciliation.
I read about this one incredible project where a group of women who had been displaced from their homes came together to start a cooperative bakery.
Oh, wow.
And they pooled their resources, shared their skills, and created a thriving business.
That's amazing.
It not only provides them with income, but also serves as a community hub.
That's so cool.
It's inspiring to see how people are finding ways to support each other and rebuild their lives.
It really is, and that's a perfect example of the resilience and the entrepreneurial spirit that exists within Syrian communities.
Yeah.
And then there's the potential for a cultural renaissance.
Oh.
Syria has such a rich history and vibrant artistic heritage.
Imagine the power of art, music, literature
Total.
to rekindle national pride,
Yeah.
offer a platform for dialogue and reconciliation,
Yeah.
and to remind the world of the beauty and resilience of the Syrian people.
It's not just about looking inward, though.
Right.
The international community also has a crucial role to play in supporting Syria's journey towards stability and prosperity.
What can they do?
Organizations like the United Nations and countless NGOs have the expertise, resources, and global reach to provide vital aid, coordinate reconstruction efforts, and advocate for the needs of the Syrian people.
So we've talked about the potential for economic revitalization, the power of community, and the role of international support.
Yeah.
But the question remains, how do we translate these seeds of hope into concrete steps toward a more stable future for Syria?
That's the big question.
It feels like we've covered so much in this deep dive.
Yeah.
From just the depths of the devastation to those little glimmers of hope,
Yeah.
and from the challenges to the potential paths forward, like rebuilding Syria just seems like such a massive undertaking.
It is.
But it really does come down to people, right?
It does. You're absolutely right. It's about those Syrian families who've lost everything, loved
Yeah.
ones, their homes, their livelihoods. It's about the millions of children whose education has been disrupted and whose futures are uncertain.
Right.
And it's about all those countless individuals carrying the unseen scars of trauma and loss.
Yeah, so where do you even begin to address all of that?
Rebuilding Syria means rebuilding lives.
Yeah.
It means restoring hope and giving individuals the power to shape their own destinies.
Okay.
It's about creating a society where everyone feels safe and valued and able to contribute.
But we talked about so many challenges, right? Like the political instability, economic,
Right.
ruin the social divisions.
Right.
It's hard to imagine a path toward that kind of future.
It is a long and difficult journey.
Yeah.
There will be setbacks and obstacles along the way, but the human spirit is incredibly resilient.
For sure.
Even in the darkest of times, we see these amazing acts of courage and compassion and determination.
Are there examples of that in Syria today amidst all the destruction and hardship?
Absolutely. What's so inspiring is that even amidst the ruins, Syrians haven't given up on their dreams. They're rebuilding their communities, they're starting businesses, they're creating art, and they're working tirelessly to heal the wounds of war.
So it's not just about outside intervention, it's about the Syrian people themselves taking ownership of their future.
Exactly. They're the ones who will ultimately rebuild their nation.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that we, the international community, don't have a responsibility to help.
Sure.
It's about providing humanitarian aid, investing in development projects, and creating opportunities for Syrians to rebuild their lives with dignity.
That sounds like a lot more than just writing a check.
It is.
So what are some concrete ways that the international community can make a difference?
Well, supporting organizations working on the ground in Syria is crucial.
Okay.
These organizations provide essential services like healthcare, education, psychosocial support.
Okay.
They also work on rebuilding infrastructure and creating economic opportunities.
So we're talking about supporting those NGOs that we talked about.
Yes, supporting reputable NGOs with a proven track record is key. And in addition to that, advocating for peaceful resolutions to conflicts,
Right.
holding those responsible for atrocities accountable,
Yeah.
and promoting policies that address the root causes of instability are vital steps toward creating a global environment where conflicts like the one in Syria are less likely to occur.
This has been such an insightful deep dive. I
Yeah.
think we've all learned a lot about the scale of the challenges, the glimmers of hope, and the long road ahead for Syria.
Right.
So what would you say is the most important thing for our listeners to take away from this conversation?
I think the most important takeaway is that rebuilding Syria isn't just a Syrian issue.
Right.
It's a global issue that demands our attention,
Yeah.
our compassion, and our commitment to creating a more just and peaceful world.
Well, we reached the end of our deep dive today,
Yeah,
but obviously the conversation doesn't stop here.
it doesn't.
So what can our listeners do to stay engaged and informed?
I think just continue learning about the Syrian people, their struggles and their aspirations. Support organizations working on the ground, advocate for peace, and engage in meaningful conversations about how we can collectively contribute to a brighter future for Syria.
It's a long road ahead, but I think
Ugh.
together we can make a difference.
I agree.
So thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thank you.